The great dome of the Ethel Guardian Concordat was not built. It was sung into existence, a masterpiece of crystalline resonance that spanned the breadth of a small moon. Light did not merely illuminate this chamber. It danced, refracted through millions of faceted surfaces that held the memories of the 7,000 cycles of the Golden Age. Here, the atmosphere was not oxygen and nitrogen, but gravitas and history. The air hummed with the psionic feedback of the high archons, tall, slender beings whose skin shimmered like mother-of-pearl and whose movements were as fluid as water in zero gravity. They were the custodians of the harmonic galaxy, the architects of the starlight lanes, and the undisputed masters of aesthetic technology. Yet on this rotation, the light within the dome was dim, pulsing with a low, throbbing violet that signified deep anxiety, bordering on terror. The cause of this distress sat in the center of the obsidian floor, a holographic projection of the galactic rim, where the darkness was eating the stars. High Archon Valerius, the first voice of the Concordat, stood upon the raised dais, his long, tapering fingers gripping the railing of spun glass. His eyes, usually a calm azure, were now turbulent pools of indigo. He looked down at the assembly of representatives, species from 100 worlds, all draped in the silks and light weaves of high civilization. They were beautiful, elegant, and utterly terrified. The projection below them showed the encroaching void, a phenomenon they called the silence. It was not a fleet, not a biological plague, but an unraveling of physics itself, a creeping nothingness that silenced the songs of stars and erased the existence of worlds. It had consumed the outer sectors in less than a standard cycle. The Ethel Guardian fleets, magnificent vessels of solar sails and singing crystal cores, had shattered against the silence like glass thrown against a mountain. Their weapons, designed for precision and elegance, for the disruption of shields and the incapacitation of systems, did nothing against an enemy that simply ceased to be. "The reports from the 7th sector are final," Valerius spoke, his voice amplified by the acoustics of the dome so that it resonated in the chest of every being present. "The singerships of the 3rd Armada have fallen silent. We have received no transmission, no final aria of glory. They are simply gone." A ripple of despair moved through the crowd, a physical wave of shifting colors as bioluminescent patches on the delegates flared in distress. Valerius paused, letting the weight of the tragedy settle before delivering the final, bitter pill. "In our desperation, the Council has authorized the invocation of the Treaty of Desperate Measures. We have called for aid from the non-aligned sectors. We have summoned the Terrans." The silence that followed this announcement was different from the cosmic silence consuming their borders. This was a silence of shock, of disgust. A murmur broke out among the delegates, starting low and rising to a clamor of disbelief. A representative of the Cygnus Collective, a being of floating light and gas contained within a containment suit of filigree gold, floated upward. "The Terrans?" The Cygnus representative vibrated, its voice a synthesized chord of skepticism. "The scavengers of Sol, you summon the dust crawlers to the High Synod. They are primitives, Valerius. They burn dead plants for fuel. They weld plates of crude iron together and call them starships. Their technology is not woven, it is hammered. They are an insult to the physics we cherish." Valerius closed his eyes, his expression weary. "They are the only species that has survived in the dead zone for 3,000 cycles. Their aesthetic is repulsive, yes. Their methods are crude, undeniably, but they claim to have a solution. And when the alternative is non-existence, I will listen to the stones speak if I must." He gestured with a sweeping motion of his hand, and the heavy blast doors at the far end of the chamber began to grind open. The sound was jarring, a mechanical screech that offended the refined ears of the assembly. Through the opening walked not a procession of floating dignitaries or light-woven avatars, but a small group of bipeds, their footsteps heavy and rhythmic. Clad in suits that looked like they were made of abrasive fibers and hardened polymers, devoid of any glowing circuitry or elegant lines, the humans entered the sanctum of the galaxy's elite. Leading them was a man who looked as weathered as the hull of a mining barge. His face was lined with the scars of radiation burns and time, his hair a shock of iron gray cropped close to his skull. He wore a heavy coat with a high collar, adorned not with medals of light, but with simple metallic pips on the shoulders. He walked with a slight limp, the sound of a magnetic boot assist clicking against the pristine floor with a rhythmic, industrial cadence. He stopped in the center of the chamber, looking up at the dais where Valerius stood. The contrast was painful to behold, the ethereal, glowing alien lord and the solid, dense block of a human. The human did not bow. He did not perform the harmonic hum of greeting. He simply nodded, a sharp, utilitarian jerk of the chin. "I am Admiral Vance," the human said. His voice was gravel, unmodulated, carrying the rough edges of a throat that had breathed recycled air for too long. You rang the bell. Valerius looked down, suppressing a shudder of distaste at the harshness of the human's tone. We issued a distress call, Admiral. We did not ring a bell. The situation is dire. The silence approaches the inner systems. Our fleets have proven ineffective. It pained him to admit it, to strip away the pride of the Ethelgard before these savages. We understand you have experience with hazardous environments. We hoped you might possess navigational data that could help us evacuate. Vance looked around the room, his dark eyes scanning the terrified faces of the galactic elite. He saw the shimmering robes, the floating jewelry, the panic hidden behind masks of porcelain and light. Evacuate? Vance asked, the word rolling off his tongue like a stone. You want to run? Where to? The Andromeda link is unstable. The Magellanic Bridge is collapsed. There is nowhere to run, High Archon. You called us because you want to know if we can fight it. A laugh, sharp and tinkling like breaking crystal, echoed from the gallery. It was a delegate from the Lyran Ascendancy, a tall, feline creature draped in velvet. Fight it, the Lyran scoffed. With what? We have seen your ships, human. They are boxes of rust held together by gravity bolts and prayer. They leak radiation. They are loud. They are slow. You fly garbage heaps through the void. Do you propose to throw scrap metal at a cosmic event until it goes away? Vance turned slowly, his magnetic boot pivoting on the floor. He looked at the Lyran, his expression unreadable, calm, almost bored. We don't build for beauty, Vance said softly, though his voice carried to the back of the room. We build for the storm, you people. You live in a garden. You grew up under stable stars with calm solar winds and abundant energy. You built your ships like art because you never feared the dark. Humanity, we didn't have that luxury. We were born on a death world, and when we left it, we found a galaxy that didn't want us. We live in the asteroid belts, the radiation zones, the gravity wells where your singing ships would crumble in seconds. You see rust. We see ablative armor. You see leaks. We see redundant venting systems. You see scrap. Vance paused, looking back at Valerius. We see survival. And what do you bring to this war, Admiral? Valerius asked, his patience thinning. We need weapons of ontological power. We need to rewrite the laws that the silence is breaking. Do you have a reality anchor, a singularity loom, or do you have kinetic projectiles? We brought the Hephaestus asterisk, Vance said. It's in orbit now. It's waiting for your clearance to descend to the lower atmosphere engagement zone. The asterisk Hephaestus, Valerius consulted his data slate. Our sensors register it as a mass of incoherent signals. It appears to be a mining platform welded to a freighter engine. It is. Massive, I will grant you that, but it reads as inert. There is no active course signature, no zero-point energy extraction. It is dead weight, Admiral. You brought a dead ship to a war for existence. It's not dead, Vance said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. It's just heavy, and it's not a mining platform, it's an anvil. The conversation was cut short by a scream, not from a throat, but from the dome itself. The crystalline structure vibrated violently, a high-pitched keen of structural stress. The lights flickered and turned a blood red. A massive hologram erupted in the center of the room, overriding the previous display. It showed the system's edge. The silence had arrived. It was faster than predicted. A wall of absolute distortion was tearing through the Uit cloud, erasing the cometary debris instantly. The outer defense satellites, masterpieces of Ethelgardian engineering, simply vanished from the sensors. There was no explosion, no debris field. One moment they were there, singing their data back to the homeworld. The next, they were null. Panic! The word was not spoken but felt, a psychic shockwave that floored half the delegates. The Ethelgardian guards, armed with resonant staves, looked at their commanders in confusion. The High Archons were paralyzed. This was the end. The silence would consume the sun, then the planets, and finally this dome. The beauty of their civilization would be erased, leaving not even a ruin to mark their passing. Clearance granted, Valerius shouted, his voice cracking, shedding all pretense of dignity. Do whatever you can, If you can buy us an hour, a minute, just do it. Vance tapped the side of his neck, activating a subdermal comms link. Command to Hephaestus, drop the cloak, initiate the wake protocol, you have the floor. Above the planet, in the high orbit where the sleek silver needle ships of the Ethelgardian fleet hovered in trembling formation, space seemed to bruise. The human ship had been there the whole time, hidden not by elegant light-bending technology, but by a brute-force electronic warfare jammer that simply flooded the local sensors with so much static that they ignored the anomaly. Now the static stopped, and the Hephaestus was revealed. It was hideous. It was magnificent. It was a monstrosity of industrial engineering, a block of dark, scarred metal 5 kilometers long and 3 kilometers high. It had no aerodynamics, for it was never meant to touch an atmosphere. It was covered in scaffolding, pipes the size of skyscrapers, and vast spherical tanks of unknown contents. Its hull was a patchwork of different metals, welded together in layers so thick they defied logic. It looked like a city that had been crushed into a brick and thrown into space. There were no glowing engines, no elegant fins, just mass, sheer, unadulterated mass. On the bridge of the Ethel Guardian flagship Song of the Stars asterisk, Fleetmaster Ilian stared at the sensor readings in horror. "It's falling," he whispered. "It has no propulsion strong enough to hold that mass in this gravity well. It is going to crash into the planet." But the Hephaestus did not crash. As it descended, the huge spherical tanks along its flanks vented, not plasma but steam. Superheated, pressurized gas ejected with the force of a volcanic eruption, acting as crude but immensely powerful chemical thrusters. The ship groaned, a sound transmitted through the atmosphere, a low, tectonic rumble that rattled the teeth of everyone on the ground. It descended like a hammer, positioning itself directly between the incoming wall of the silence and the planet below. "What are they doing?" Ilian demanded. "That wall erases matter. Placing a physical obstruction in its path is suicide. It will eat the ship in seconds." Inside the council dome, the hologram showed the asterisk Hephaestus hanging in the sky, a dark bruise against the stars. The wall of the silence rushed toward it, a tsunami of non-existence. The alien delegates covered their eyes or prostrated themselves, waiting for the end. Admiral Vance stood still, watching the screen, his hands clasped behind his back. He checked his wrist chrono. 3, 2, 1, brace. "Brace for what?" Valerius cried out. "It is just scrap metal." Then the asterisk Hephaestus fired its first shot. It was not a laser. It was not a particle beam. It was not a missile. Along the 5-kilometer length of the ship, massive mechanical locks disengaged. The spine of the ship opened, revealing a dark, hollow interior lined with coils of copper and tungsten the size of city blocks. From the center of this hollow, a cylinder was ejected. It was a projectile, solid iron, the size of a skyscraper, but it wasn't fired with explosives. It was fired with magnetism, a railgun of such primitive, overwhelming scale that the recoil pushed the 5-kilometer ship backward against its own thrusters. The projectile flew into the heart of the silence. "Kinetic impact," the Lyran delegate laughed hysterically. "You shot a bullet at the void." The projectile hit the event horizon of the silence, and then it detonated. But it didn't explode outward with fire. It exploded asterisk inward with gravity. The humans hadn't filled the shell with explosives. They had filled it with ultra-dense degenerate matter, harvested from the crush depth of a white dwarf star, held stable by magnetic fields. When the shell cracked, the magnetic fields collapsed. For a split second, the projectile possessed the gravitational pull of a small black hole. The silence, which functioned by unraveling the weak nuclear forces of matter, suddenly ran into a knot of physics so dense, so stubborn, that it couldn't unravel it. The wall of nothingness hit the gravity spike and bent asterisk. The wave of destruction warped, twisting around the singularity, shattering its coherence. The silence recoiled. It was like watching a tidal wave hit a breakwater of solid diamond. The sky screamed as the laws of physics fought a cage match. The silence tried to erase the singularity tried to eat the silence. The result was a shockwave of pure distortion that rippled outward, knocking the sensors of every ship in the system offline. On the ground, the windows of the great dome shattered. Valerius was thrown to the floor. The light fixtures exploded. Darkness fell, save for the terrifying, beautiful glow of the gravity tier in the upper atmosphere. Silence returned to the chamber, but it was the silence of ringing ears and stunned survival. Slowly, the emergency lights flickered on, bathing. Room in harsh orange. Valerius pulled himself up, bleeding from a cut on his forehead. He looked at the screen. The display was fuzzy, rebooting. When it cleared, the gasp from the assembly sucked the air from the room. The silence had been halted. There was a hole in the approaching wall, a jagged tier where the human projectile had detonated. The encroachment had stopped. The asterisk Hephaestus was still there, smoking, venting plasma from overheated coils, debris drifting from its hull, but it was intact. Vance hadn't moved. He was brushing a shard of glass off his shoulder. "Effect on target," he muttered. "Reloading cycle time 4 minutes." Valerius stared at the human. The fear was gone, replaced by a profound, trembling confusion. What was that?" "That," Vance said, turning to face the Archon, "was a warning shot. We call it a gravity anchor. It tells the universe that no, you do not get to delete this space. This space is occupied. We have 12 more in the magazine." You weaponized a star's core?" Valerius whispered. "The radiation, the instability. It is madness. It is ugly. It is dangerous." "It worked," Vance said simply. "But that won't hold it forever. That was just to buy us time to talk. Now, High Archon, are you ready to listen, or are you going to critique the paint job on my ship?" The shift in the room was palpable. The arrogance of the elder races had evaporated, replaced by a sudden, terrifying realization of what humanity actually was. They were not scavengers because they were poor. They were scavengers because they repurposed the deadliest things in the universe. They didn't build elegant ships because they didn't care about flow, they cared about yield. They were the galaxy's mechanics, walking into a room of poets to fix a broken furnace with a sledgehammer. "We are listening," Valerius said, bowing his head for the first time in 1,000 years. "Good," Vance said. He walked to the council table, pushing aside a delicate sculpture of light to lay down a heavy, laminated star chart. "The silence isn't a natural phenomenon, it's a frequency, a resonance. You couldn't see it because your sensors are tuned to harmony. You look for beauty, for patterns. The silence is pure dissonance, it's noise. And if there's one thing humanity knows better than anyone else, it's noise." Vance tapped a sector on the map, deep in the uncharted territories. "We tracked the source. It's not an invasion, it's a demolition crew. Someone is clearing the galactic slate. They think this galaxy is condemned structure. We intend to prove them wrong." "How?" asked the representative from Cygnus, the golden lights of its suit dim and humble now. "If our singerships failed, if our harmony could not soothe it, how can you stop the source?" "By being louder," Vance said. "The asterisk Hephaestus isn't just a railgun platform. That hull, the one you called scrap. It's a reverberation chamber. We don't just endure the noise, we amplify it. We're going to fly into the center of that void, and we're going to scream back at it with the resonant frequency of a dying neutron star. We're going to jam their signal." "That is suicide," Valerius breathed. "To enter the void, no mind can withstand the nothingness." "We can," Vance said, and for a moment his eyes looked incredibly old, filled with the ghosts of Earth's violent, chaotic history. "We've been staring into the void since we crawled out of the caves. We filled the silence with our own noise, our wars, our music, our machines. We are the masters of dissonance. The silence doesn't scare us, it just annoys us." The second phase of the operation began an hour later. The Ethel Guardian fleet, battered and humbled, formed up behind the asterisk Hephaestus. The human ship looked even more incongruous now, surrounded by the sleek, repaired vessels of the Concordat. It was a junkyard dog leading a pack of greyhounds. The destination was the Tier, the origin point of the silence, a rift in spacetime located in the dead sector. As the fleet jumped, the sensation was nausea-inducing. The human drive technology didn't glide through subspace, it punched a hole through it. The asterisk Hephaestus tore its way through the dimensions, dragging the alien fleet in its wake like a turbulent stream. On the bridge of the asterisk Hephaestus asterisk, the atmosphere was drastically different from the Ethel Guardian dome. It was dark, lit by tactical displays and the sparks of welding torches where crews were reinforcing bulkheads mid-flight. The air smelled of ozone, coffee, and sweat. Vance sat in his command chair, an old, leather-upholstered seat that looked like it came from an ancient aircraft. He watched the displays. "Status on the main array." "Array is at 90%, reported his XO, a woman named Sarah with a cybernetic eye and an arm covered in grease. "The coils are hot, Admiral. If we push them past 110%, we melt the keel." "Push them to 120%, Vance ordered. "If the keel melts, we'll hold it. Together with gravity clamps, we need the output." They dropped out of warp at the edge of the tier. It was a sight that defied description, a hole in the universe, jagged and bleeding violet energy. It wasn't black, it was a color that the eyes couldn't process, a negation of color. The silence poured from it, a river of entropy. "All ships," Vance transmitted. "Form up in the shadow of the asterisk Hephaestus asterisk. Divert all power to shields. Do not, I repeat, do not try to engage. You are the audience, we are the main event." The asterisk Hephaestus moved forward. As it entered the influence of the tier, the ship began to groan. Metal sheared, the outer scaffolding twisted, but the ship held. It was built of layers of armor designed to ablate, to peel away. The outer skin burned off, revealing the scarred, ugly, resilient skeleton beneath. "Deploying the Echo," Vance said. The scrap that the aliens had mocked, the strange antennas, the dish arrays that looked like rusted flowers, began to unfold. They locked into place, forming a massive parabolic dish the size of a continent, aimed directly at the tier. "Spin up the core," Vance ordered. Deep inside the asterisk Hephaestus asterisk, the engine, which was actually a captured, contained magnetar fragment, began to spin. The magnetic screech was audible even through the vacuum, transmitted by the vibrating hull of the ship itself. It was a sound of pure industrial agony. "Transmit!" The Hephaestus fired, not a projectile this time, a sound, a broadcast. It blasted a signal of pure, chaotic data into the tier. It was a recording of Earth, not Mozart, not speeches of peace. It was the sound of factories, of thunderstorms, of shifting tectonic plates, of internet data streams, of radio static, of a billion human voices arguing, laughing, crying. It was the white noise of humanity. It was chaotic, abrasive, and overwhelmingly complex. The silence, which relied on the simple, orderly deletion of data, choked. The complexity of the human signal was too dense to delete instantly. The void gagged on the information overload. The tier began to fluctuate. Violet energy spasmed. "It's working," Ilian cried out from the asterisk song of the stars asterisk. "The entropy wave is receding, they are feeding it more chaos than it can process." But the source pushed back. A beam of pure negation shot from the tier, striking the asterisk Hephaestus. The human ship shuddered violently. A third of its mass simply vanished, erased from existence. Decks 40 through 90 were gone. Thousands of crew members gone. On the bridge, Vance was thrown from his chair. Sparks rained down. "Damage report." "We lost the port flank," Sarah screamed, clutching her bleeding side. "Structural integrity at 40%. The magnetar containment is failing." "Hold it together," Vance roared, climbing back up. "We aren't done yet. Reroute power from life support. Reroute power from the gravity plating. Feed it all into the dish. Admiral, if we do that, the radiation will kill us in minutes. If we don't, the silence kills everyone forever. Do it." The asterisk Hephaestus began to glow white-hot. The scrap metal turned into a beacon of blinding energy. The signal intensified. It became a scream of defiance, a refusal to go gently into that good night. And then something answered. From the tier, the demolition crew paused. The entity behind the silence, a consciousness vast and cold, hesitated. It had encountered resistance before: energy shields, psychic barriers, weapons of light. It had deleted them all. But it had never encountered stubbornness. It had never encountered a species that would set itself on fire just to make the darkness too bright to look at. The tier began to close. The cost of erasing the asterisk Hephaestus asterisk was becoming higher than the energy gain of destroying the galaxy. The cosmic equation was no longer balanced. The demolition was over budget. With a final, thunderous crack that rippled through the subspace fabric, the tier collapsed. The silence evaporated, leaving behind only the scarred, burning wreck of the human ship and the stunned silence of the galaxy. The Hephaestus drifted, a ruin. It was barely a ship anymore. It was a twisted skeleton of molten metal. But on the bridge, the lights were still on. Valerius's shuttle docked with the wreckage hours later. He floated through the corridors, his robes trailing in the zero gravity, passing the bodies of human engineers who had died at their posts, fusing the circuits with their own hands to keep the signal going. He reached the bridge. Vance was slumped in the captain's chair, breathing shallowly. His skin was gray, his eyes dim. The radiation sickness was already taking him. Valerius approached him, tears of liquid light streaming down his face. "Admiral," Valerius whispered, "you saved us. You saved everything." Vance coughed, a wet, rattling sound. He looked at the beautiful alien, then at the view screen where the stars were shining again, clear and bright. "Told you," Vance raw. "Sped just needed a little noise." "We judged you," Valerius said, his voice breaking. "We called you scavengers. We called your work scrap. We were blind. You are the shield bearers. You are the iron in the soul of the galaxy." Vance smiled, a weak, crooked thing. Don't start writing poetry about us, Archon. We're just janitors. We clean up the messes." He closed his eyes. "Is the ship salvageable?" Valerius looked around at the devastated bridge, the melted walls, the exposed space. "It is a ruin, Admiral. It is destroyed." "No," Vance whispered, fading fast. "It's raw material. We can weld it back." His voice trailed off. Silence claimed him, not the cosmic silence, but the peaceful silence of a job done. But the story did not end there. Act 3 began in the aftermath. The surviving humans did not mourn with songs, they mourned with torches. They towed the wreck of the asterisk Hephaestus back to Sol, and the Ethelgard came with them. For the first time, the elegant ships of the Concordat entered the smog-choked industrial orbits of Earth and Mars. They did not come to teach, they came to learn. The unity that formed was strange. The aliens brought their medical tech, their terraforming, their art. The humans gave them steel. They gave them the philosophy of the good enough, the doctrine of redundancy, the beauty of the weld scar. 10 cycles later, a new threat emerged. A signal from the Great Attractor. A message. It was not a demolition crew this time. It was a distress call. A call from a civilization far older than the Ethelgard, far more advanced, trapped in a dying universe. The High Synod gathered again. Valerius, older now, scarred himself from the war, stood next to the new human admiral, a young woman who had served under Vance. "They are calling for help," Valerius said. "The physics of their universe are collapsing. They need an anchor. They need a bridge." "We can't send a singer ship," the admiral said. "It's too fragile." Valerius smiled. It was a human expression, sharp and confident. "No, we do not send glass to hold up a falling sky." The hologram in the center of the room activated. It showed the new flagship of the United Galactic Fleet. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. It had the crystalline core of an Ethel Guardian vessel, encased in the brutal, heavy armor of a Terran dreadnought. It was a marriage of light and iron. "We send the asterisk Vance asterisk," Valeria said. "It is ugly, it is heavy, it is scrap. And it is the only thing that will work," the Admiral finished. The twist came when they decoded the full message from the Great Attractor. The distress call wasn't from strangers. The data packets contained biological markers, history files, star charts. The civilization dying in the other universe was humanity. The humans of Sol were not the originals. They were the lifeboat. They were the seed launched eons ago, de-evolved, stripped of their tech, and forced to grow hard and strong in the mud so that one day, when they were tough enough, they could come back and save their creators. The scrap they built was an instinctual memory of the technology they had lost. Admiral Vance hadn't just saved the galaxy. He had completed the mission programmed into his DNA a billion years ago. He had forged the key to go home. As the asterisk Vance powered up its engines, a hybrid of singing crystal and roaring nuclear fire, the galaxy watched. The ship didn't just fly, it thundered. It was the sound of a species that had forgotten how to be gods, only to remember how to be something better, survivors. The Vance fired its engines, and for a moment the entire galaxy vibrated with the roar. It was not a noise of destruction. It was the sound of a hammer hitting an anvil, forging a new future. They thought it was just scrap, but scrap is just a sword that hasn't been melted down yet. And humanity was the fire. The end. The immense scale of the conflict had settled, but the ramifications rippled through the political landscape of the Concordat like shockwaves through water. The weeks following the Battle of the Tier were filled not with celebration, but with a frantic, obsessive restructuring of galactic understanding. The Ethel Guardian scholars, once content to study the harmonics of light and the poetry of nebulas, now flooded the human shipyards at the Mars orbital ring. They floated through the corridors of industrial stations, their delicate robes trailing over grease-stained bulkheads, their eyes wide with a mixture of horror and fascination. They were trying to understand the human variable. In the great library of Xylos, a new wing was being dedicated. It was not built of crystal. It was built of riveting steel, a deliberate stylistic choice that would have been considered heresy a month ago. Inside, High Archon Valerius walked with Ambassador Sarah, the former XO of the asterisk Hephaestus who now bore the weight of representing humanity to the galaxy. Her cybernetic eye. He whirred softly as she scanned the data stacks. "You are rewriting your history books," Sarah noted, her voice rougher than the melodic tones of the Archon but softer than Vance's had been. "We are correcting them," Valerius replied. He stopped before a holographic display of a human combustion engine, a primitive, dirty, exploding machine from Earth's pre-spaceflight era. "We spent eons believing that efficiency was synonymous with elegance. We believed that if a technology was not beautiful, it was flawed. You proved that the universe does not care for beauty. The universe is violent, chaotic, and messy. To survive it, one must be willing to get dirty." Sarah touched the display. "Vance used to say that polish is just friction you haven't put to use yet." "He was a wise man in his own brutal way," Valeria said. "But there is something I must show you, something we found in the deep data logs of the asterisk Hephaestus asterisk. After the battle, when we helped recover the flight recorders. We found a subroutine running in the background of your ship's computer. It was not part of the navigational systems. It was not part of the weapon systems." Sarah frowned. "What was it?" "It was a countdown," Valeria said. He waved his hand and the display changed. It showed a complex fractal equation, a timer ticking down. "It seems that the scrap you build, it listens, it records, and it transmits." "Transmits where?" "To the silence," Valeria said, dropping the bombshell with the weight of a planet. Sarah stepped back, her hand instinctively going to the sidearm she no longer wore. "That's impossible. We destroyed the silence." "You pushed it back," Valerius corrected. "You proved you were too indigestible to eat, but this signal, it suggests that the silence was not an enemy, it was a query." The atmosphere in the library shifted from academic to conspiratorial. Valerius lowered his voice. "Signal your ship sent, the chaos, the noise of humanity. It contained a code. We decoded it. It wasn't just noise, Sarah. It was a handshake protocol." Sarah stared at him. "You're saying we are compatible with the void?" "I am saying that the silence is a filter," Valerius said. "A galactic filter. It wipes out civilizations that become too stagnant, too fragile. The Ethelgard. We had stopped evolving. We were perfect, static, crystal. We were ready to be archived. But humanity. You are still changing. You are volatile. The silence tasted your data and recognized potential. That is why it retreated. It didn't leave because it was beaten. It left because you passed the test." This revelation hung heavy in the air. The humans hadn't just defeated a monster. They had passed an entrance exam they didn't know they were taking. And the countdown? Sarah asked. It is for the next test, Valeria said. But we have time, and this time we will not face it as separate species. We have initiated the hybrid initiative. We are refitting the Ethel Guardian fleet. With what? With ablative armor, Valeria said, a small, proud smile touching his lips. And railguns. The scene shifts to the shipyards of Saul. The scale is industrial madness. The sleek, needle-like ships of the aliens are being docked into massive human cradles. Sparks shower down like rain as human welders fuse heavy plating onto the delicate alien hulls. It is a desecration of art and the birth of war. A human engineer, a burly man named Kale, wipes sweat from his brow. He is talking to a Lyran technician, a creature that looks like a bipedal leopard. No, no, Kale says, pointing his welding torch at the exposed warp core of the Lyran ship. You can't have the coolant lines running on the outside just because they glow pretty blue. That's a weak point. We're burying them under 3 meters of lead. The Lyran hisses in distress. But the harmonic resonance requires exposure to the stellar wind. The harmonic resonance requires you not to explode when you get hit by a rock, Kale retorts. We're burying the lines and we're adding manual backups. Manual? The Lyran looks horrified. Physical switches like levers. Big iron levers, Kale confirms. Because when the computer gets fried by an EMP, you're gonna want to be able to dump the core with your hands. Trust me, we've crashed more ships than you've built. We know how they break. This was the new dynamic. The humans were the teachers of disaster. They taught the galaxy how to fail safely. They taught the high races that redundancy was not waste, it was life. And in the center of the shipyard, the new flagship was taking shape, the Vance Asterisk. It was a monstrosity of integration. The core was an Ethel Guardian singularity stone capable of infinite energy generation. But the housing was pure Terran brutalism. It was a fortress. High above the galactic plane, the silence watched. Or rather, the entities behind the silence watched. They were the curators, ancient beyond time. They managed the entropy of the universe. They had seen 1 billion civilizations rise and fall. Most reached the crystal stage, perfect, beautiful, and dead. They stopped struggling, stopped growing, and eventually the curators would wipe the slate clean to make room for new growth. But this cycle was different. The Mudborn have infected the Crystalborn, one curator communicated to another, not in words, but in the transfer of pure understanding. The Ethelgard are welding iron to their souls. They are becoming crude again. Is this a regression? The second curator asked. No, the first replied. It is a hardening. They are preparing for the great filter, the humans. They carry the old code. They build like the progenitors. The progenitors died out eons ago. Did they? Or did they just hide in the mud until it was safe to come out? The curators turned their attention to the signal coming from the great attractor. The distress call that Valerius and the Admiral had detected. The humans are responding to the signal, the curator noted. They are building a bridge to the dying universe. If they open that bridge, the second curator warned, they will let the entropy flood in. They will destroy this reality. Or, the first curator mused, they will stitch the two realities together. They have the technology of the anchor. They understand the dissonance. We must observe. If they succeed, they are not just survivors. They are inheritors. Back on the Vance Asterisk, the day of launch arrived. The ship was crewed by a mix of species. Ethel Guardians manned the sensors, their minds interfacing directly with the crystal optics. Humans manned the guns and the engines, their hands on the manual overrides, their grit ensuring the machine kept running even when physics said it shouldn't. Lyrans manned the fighter squadrons, their reflexes augmented by human targeting suites. Admiral Sarah stood on the bridge. All systems green, she said. Reactor output at 100%, gravity plating stable. Valeria stood beside her. The path to the great attractor is long. We will be leaving the charted zones. We will be in the dark. We like the dark, Sarah said. It's where the best scrap is found. She engaged the comms. Fleet, this is Vance Asterisk. Course is set for the interuniversal signal. We are going to find out who is calling us, and if they're friendly, we help. If they're hostile. Well, we brought the hammer. Engage, Valeria said. The Vance didn't just jump, it punched. The reality drive activated. The ship enveloped itself in a bubble of localized physics, a bubble where the laws of the universe were enforced by human stubbornness. It shot forward, leaving a trail of distorted starlight. As they traveled, the nature of the scrap became even clearer. The ship was self-repairing, not through nanotechnology, but through mechanical consumption. As they passed through asteroid fields, the ship's magnetic scoops grabbed rocks, melted them down in the internal foundries, and printed new armor plates on the fly. The ship grew as it traveled. It was an organism of metal and fire. They reached the edge of the great attractor after 3 weeks of superluminal travel. The gravity here was immense, enough to crush a normal starship. But the Vance was an anvil. It sat in the gravity well, heavy and immovable. The signal was strong here. It was a voice. A human voice. "This is Earth Prime," the voice said, broadcasting on a loop. "Timeline Beta has failed. The collapse is imminent. We are sending the seed ships. If anyone is receiving this, remember us, rebuild us." Sarah froze. "Earth Prime, Timeline Beta?" Valerius looked at the readings. "This signal is old, Sarah. It is billions of years old. It predates your evolution on Earth." "So we are the seed ship," Sarah whispered. "The humans on Earth. We were the backup plan." "It appears so," Valerius said. "The progenitors, Earth Prime, faced a threat they could not defeat, so they sent out capsules, genetic printers. They seeded 1,000 worlds with humanity, hoping one of them would survive, evolve, and come back. And we're the only ones who made it back. The Ethelgard have watched the stars for eons," Valerius said softly. "We have never seen another race like yours. You are the only ones." "Then we have a job to do," Sarah said, her voice hardening. "We aren't just here to listen, we're here to salvage." "Salvage what? A dead timeline?" "No," Sarah said. "We're going to salvage the past." She turned to the tactical station. "Target the source of the signal, prepare the reality anchors. We're going to fire a lifeline through the time distortion." "Admiral," the Lyran tactical officer warned, "firing a high-mass projectile into a temporal rift could cause a paradox event." "It's not a projectile," Sarah said. "It's a tow cable." The Vance maneuvered, aiming its massive spinal railgun at the center of the Great Attractor's anomaly. Inside the gun, a SCI round was loaded. It was a quantum tether, a device that entangled 2 points in spacetime. "Fire!" The ship shuddered. The tether shot out, trailing a cable of pure energy. It pierced the anomaly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the line went taut. The Vance groaned, its frame screaming under the stress. They had hooked something heavy. "I'm reading a massive object coming through the rift," the sensor officer shouted. "It's, by the stars, it's a planet." Pulling against the drag of a collapsing universe, the Vance reversed thrusters. The combined power of the Ethelgardian singularity and the Terran engines burned with the brightness of a supernova. They were fishing in the river of time, and they had caught a leviathan. Slowly, agonizingly, the object emerged from the rift. It was a planet. A scarred, war-torn planet covered in megastructures, smoking ruins, and vast defensive grids. It was Earth Prime. As the planet stabilized in the current universe, the comms lit up. Thousands of voices. "Unknown vessel, this is Terran Command Prime. We read you, the collapse. It stopped. You pulled us out. Identify yourself." Sarah picked up the mic. Her hand trembled slightly. "Terran Command, this is the United Galactic Ship *Vance *. We're the kids. We came back for you." There was a long silence on the other end. Then a voice, old and cracked with emotion. "We thought the seeds were lost. We thought we were alone." "You're not alone," Sarah said. "And you've got friends. We brought the neighbors." The reunion was not just a meeting of species. It was a meeting of eras. The humans of Earth Prime were advanced beyond comprehension, but they were exhausted, their resources spent fighting the entropy of their dying timeline. The humans of the scrap fleet were younger, cruder, but full of vitality and raw resources. The Ethelgard looked at the progenitors, these ancient humans who had built stars and moved galaxies, and saw the resemblance. The progenitors didn't build with crystal either. They built with gray metal, with rivets, with function. The aesthetic of the scrap was not an accident, it was a heritage, but the twist of the knife was yet to come. As the fleets mingled, Valerius spoke with the High Commander of Earth Prime. "What destroyed your universe?" Valerius asked. "What caused the collapse?" The High Commander, a human whose body was half machine, looked out at the stars of this new, fresh universe. "We did," he said. "We built a weapon to end all wars, a weapon that imposed absolute order. It worked too well. It stopped the chaos of quantum mechanics. It stopped the dice from rolling. It initiated the silence." Valerius went cold. "The silence, you created it." "We are the source of the entropy," the commander admitted. "We tried to contain it, but it leaked into the multiverse." "That shadow you fought, that wasn't a monster. That was our mistake spilling over." The realization hit the assembled crews. The war against the silence hadn't been an invasion, it had been a hazmat spill, and the scrappers of Saul hadn't just fought an enemy, they had cleaned up the toxic waste of their ancestors. "Then we have a lot of work to do," Valerius said. "The leak is plugged for now, but the stain remains." "We can fix it," Sarah said, joining them. "We have the Ethelgard's harmony tech now. And we have your knowledge, and we have my fleet's stubbornness. It will take 1,000,000 years to repair the damage to the subspace layer," the commander said. "We're humans," Sarah shrugged. "We're good at long shifts." The story ends not with a battle, but with construction. The combined fleets, Earth Prime, Saul, Ethelgard, and the rest, spread out across the stars. They began the Great Restoration. They didn't just terraform planets, they terraformed space itself, stitching the wounds in reality with gravity anchors and harmonic songs. The Hephaestus asterisk, or what was left of it, was turned into a monument. It floated in the center of the restored sector, a twisted, ugly lump of metal. To the uninitiated, it looked like garbage. But to the citizens of the new Concordat, it was the most beautiful thing in the sky. It was a reminder: do not fear the ugly, do not fear the heavy. Do not fear the scrap, for when the lights go out and the universe breaks, it is not the glass that holds the roof up. It is the iron. The camera pulls back, leaving the galaxy spinning in a new, stable rhythm, a rhythm that had a little bit of crystal hum and a heavy, steady, industrial beat of a drum.